My first guest this evening is an Emmy and Tony Award-winning actress you know from Fatal Attraction, Guardians of the Galaxy, and The Wife. She now stars in season 2 of the Israeli spy series Tehran. Please welcome back to The Late Show, Glenn Close.
When people talk about the greatest actors of the modern era, Glenn Close is a name that consistently comes up. With a career spanning more than 4 decades, she has earned a reputation for portraying characters who are emotionally layered, morally complex, and often difficult to categorize. Whether she's playing a villain, a vulnerable mother, or someone navigating identity and trauma, Close brings a quiet intensity to her work that has made her one of the most respected performers in Hollywood. But that respect hasn't always come with the same level of attention or praise that other, perhaps flashier actors receive.
We spent a lot of time working together, talking around the table. And for me, I had to go beat by beat by beat to understand why she didn't leave him.
Glenn Close began her acting career on the stage, and this theatrical foundation played a huge role in shaping her approach to performance. After studying at the College of William and Mary and later training at the prestigious Juilliard School in New York, Close developed a style rooted in discipline, preparation, and psychological depth. Her process doesn't rely on improvisation or instinct alone. Instead, she builds her characters through careful research and emotional understanding, often spending weeks or months internalizing who her characters are and what motivates them. This method isn't about disappearing completely into a role in the way some method actors might aim for, but rather about understanding every nuance of a character before stepping in front of the camera. Close has spoken in interviews about her fascination with human behaviour and how that shapes the roles she chooses. She doesn't look for heroes or villains, but for people who are messy, flawed, and often unpredictable. Because, as she's said more than once, that's where the truth lies. This kind of emotional and intellectual commitment has made her a favourite among directors who want actors who come to set fully prepared and willing to explore the more difficult emotional terrain of a script. But it also means that her style can sometimes clash with others who approach acting more spontaneously or casually. Unlike performers who thrive on improvisation or emotional outbursts, Close tends to favour precision. Every movement, every line, every look is intentional. It's not performative in the obvious sense. She doesn't overact or try to steal scenes, but it's clear that she's in complete control of what she's doing at every moment. This control is often what separates her from many of her peers. While some actors might view rehearsal as optional, Close sees it as essential. In her view, rehearsal isn't about repetition, it's about discovering the emotional truth of a scene so that it can be played with honesty and consistency. This way of working comes from her theatre background, where preparation is the norm, not the exception. In theatre, you don't get the luxury of multiple takes. You have to understand your character from the inside out before the curtain goes up. Close brought that same ethos into film and television, and it has shaped her reputation ever since. What also sets Glenn Close apart is her ability to play characters who are often misunderstood. Over the years, she's gravitated toward roles that explore themes of obsession, power, alienation, and identity. From Alex Forrest in Fatal Attraction to Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard on Broadway, Close tends to choose characters that aren't easy to like, but who are deeply human. She never plays them as stereotypes or caricatures. Instead, she digs into their psychology to find out what makes them tick. In Fatal Attraction, for example, Close famously pushed back against the studio's desire to make her character into a clear-cut villain. She believed that Alex was suffering from untreated mental illness and wanted that complexity to come through in her performance. Even when the ending of the film was changed to make her character more traditionally evil, Close maintained that the role deserved more empathy and depth than it was often given credit for. That commitment to portraying women as full, complicated people, not just tropes or moral lessons, has been a consistent theme in her work. Harriet's sense of empathy is also something that informs her process behind the scenes. Colleagues often describe her as generous and collaborative, but also intensely focused. She arrives on set knowing her lines, her character's emotional arc, and how that arc fits within the larger story. She's not interested in coasting through a role or relying on charisma alone. Instead, she treats each project as an opportunity to learn, to push herself, and to challenge the audience's expectations. That seriousness can sometimes create distance between her and her co-stars, especially if they're less inclined to approach acting in the same way. But by most accounts, Close doesn't impose her method on others. She doesn't try to dominate the set or demand that everyone work the way she does. What she does expect, however, is respect for the process. She takes the work seriously, and when others treat it like just another job, it can create quiet tension. Not because she's confrontational, but because she believes that storytelling is a form of responsibility. One of the most interesting aspects of Glenn Close's career is that she has never allowed herself to be boxed into one kind of role. While she's perhaps best known for dramatic performances, her range is far broader than many people realize. She's done comedy, period drama, science fiction, and even voice work in animation. But no matter the genre, her approach remains the same. Understand the character, prepare thoroughly, and bring as much truth to the performance as possible. This consistency has earned her enormous respect in the industry, but it hasn't always translated into the kind of widespread recognition that other actors with similar resumes receive. Close has been nominated for the Academy Award multiple times, more than most of her peers, but has never won. While awards aren't the only measure of success, it's a detail that has become a symbol of how her work is often quietly excellent rather than loudly celebrated. Critics and fellow actors have pointed out that part of the reason Close is sometimes overlooked is because she makes difficult work look easy. She doesn't rely on flashy performances or grand gestures. Instead, her power lies in subtlety, in restraint, in the small moments that reveal a character's inner life. These are the kinds of performances that grow in impact the more you watch them. They don't always grab the audience right away, but they stay with you long after the film is over. In a Hollywood landscape that often rewards spectacle, Glenn Close's approach can seem out of step, but that's also what makes her work so distinctive. She isn't chasing trends or trying to stay in the spotlight. She's focused on the work itself, on understanding people, telling stories with honesty, and respecting the craft that she's dedicated her life to. In doing so, she's carved out a space for herself that's as enduring as it is unique. When Glenn Close starred in Fatal Attraction in 1987, she delivered one of the most talked about performances of the decade. Her portrayal of Alex Forrest, a woman who becomes dangerously obsessed after a brief affair, was complex, emotionally raw, and unforgettable. The film became a cultural phenomenon and sparked countless conversations about relationships, mental health, and gender roles. But behind the scenes, Close's approach to the character revealed the kind of creative tension that can arise when a serious actor's interpretation doesn't fully align with the expectations of the production. From the beginning, Close saw Alex not as a villain, but as a deeply troubled woman. She believed the character was dealing with serious psychological issues and wanted to portray her with empathy rather than condemnation. In preparation, she consulted psychiatrists and did independent research on borderline personality disorder. Her goal was to show a real human being in pain, not just a narrative device meant to scare audiences. But the studio and eventually the director Adrian Lyne had a different idea. They wanted a clear-cut antagonist, someone who would frighten viewers and make a dramatic impact. This creative difference came to a head during discussions about the film's ending. In the original version, Alex takes her own life, framing Dan, the man who betrayed her, for her death. It was dark and tragic, but Close felt it was consistent with the character's emotional breakdown. However, after test screenings, the studio pushed for a more sensational finale. The ending was reshot to include a violent confrontation where Alex is killed by Dan's wife in an act of self-defense. Close was strongly opposed to the change, feeling it undermined everything she had built in the character. But ultimately, the revised ending stayed. It made for a more conventionally thrilling climax, but it also reduced Alex to a stereotype, the crazy woman trope that Close had tried so hard to avoid. This was one of the earliest and clearest examples of Close's willingness to push back against the simplification of female characters. She didn't seek conflict for its own sake, but she was deeply committed to the integrity of her performances. That commitment occasionally put her at odds with directors, producers, and even co-stars who didn't share the same priorities. In the case of Fatal Attraction, the tension didn't explode publicly, but it left Close with lingering frustration. Years later, she reflected that while she was proud of the performance, she was still disappointed that the final cut didn't fully reflect the story she had wanted to tell. A few years later, Close starred in Dangerous Liaisons, an adaptation of the French novel Les Liaisons Dangereuses, where she played the calculating and manipulative Marquise de Merthéroux. The film was a critical success and featured an ensemble cast that included John Malkovich, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Keanu Reeves. On screen, Close and Malkovich had a sharp, crackling chemistry, but off camera, their working relationship was more complicated. Both actors came from strong theatre backgrounds and were known for their intellectual approach to acting. However, their temperaments were different. Close was methodical and controlled, while Malkovich was more unpredictable and provocative in his performance style. He brought a certain raw energy to his roles that could sometimes clash with Close's carefully measured delivery. Directors who worked with them noted that their rehearsals could be intense, with each actor bringing strong opinions about the material and how it should be interpreted. According to interviews from the time, there were moments during filming when their differences in style led to tension. Close's attention to detail and need for emotional precision didn't always gel with Malkovich's looser, instinctive approach. While both actors were professionals and respected each other's talent, they didn't always see eye to eye. That tension, however, arguably added to the dynamic between their characters. The Marquise and Valmont are locked in a battle of manipulation and power, and the off-screen friction may have added an edge to their on-screen interactions. Creative tension doesn't always result in conflict. In many cases, it can enhance a performance, especially when the actors involved are experienced enough to channel it productively. But it does require a certain level of trust and communication. Without that, the working relationship can become strained. Close's approach requires stability and structure, a clear understanding of the character's motivations, the emotional beats of a scene, and how those elements fit into the larger narrative. When those elements are disrupted by improvisation or unpredictability, it can make the process more difficult for her. Another early example of this can be seen in her role in The World According to Garp, where she played Jenny Fields, a feminist nurse and single mother. The film marked one of Close's first major roles in cinema, and it also paired her with Robin Williams, who was already known for his high-energy, off-the-cuff comedic style. While Williams played a more grounded character in the film than in some of his later work, his approach to acting was still quite different from Close. At the time, Close was still adjusting to film after years in the theatre, and the transition required her to scale down her performance for the camera. Working alongside someone like Williams, whose instincts often led him to ad-lib or try new things in the moment, was both a learning experience and a challenge. Close has since spoken respectfully of Williams and the work they did together, but it was clear that their processes were not entirely compatible. She needed time and space to build her character from the inside, while Williams often discovered character through the act of performing itself. Close isn't known for public arguments or dramatic showdowns with co-stars, but there's a pattern in her career of quiet tension when her process doesn't align with those around her. Unlike some performers who thrive on spontaneity or emotional chaos, Close functions best in an environment of clarity and preparation. This doesn't mean she's inflexible. She's been praised for her ability to adapt and evolve over long shoots. But it does mean she values a certain structure in her working environment. That structure extends beyond her own performance. Directors have noted that Close expects a similar level of focus from others on set. She doesn't tolerate unprofessionalism or laziness. When she commits to a role, she expects the people around her to do the same. This expectation isn't rooted in ego, but in respect for the work. For Close, storytelling is a serious responsibility, and she brings that mindset to every production. This sense of professionalism is one reason why directors and producers continue to work with her, even if the process can be intense. They know that with Close, they're going to get a performance that's fully realized and emotionally honest. But it also means that when tensions do arise, they tend to be related to differences in philosophy rather than personality. Close isn't confrontational by nature, but she is deeply protective of her craft. Over the years, this has led to moments where directors have had to mediate between her and other actors, especially when the methods used on set clashed. For the most part, these moments haven't turned into public scandals or dramatic tabloid stories. Instead, they've become quiet examples of the challenges that come with bringing together different creative minds in a high-pressure environment. In some cases, the tension has actually led to better performances. The discomfort or friction between Close and her co-stars can sometimes mirror the tension between their characters, adding an extra layer of realism to the scenes, but it's also clear that these experiences can take a toll. While Close remains committed to her method, she has occasionally chosen roles or projects based on the likelihood of finding that creative harmony, working with directors who understand her approach and with co-stars who share a similar respect for preparation. These early instances of creative friction helped shape the rest of Clovey's career. They reinforced her belief in the importance of preparation and emotional truth, and they clarified for her what kind of working environments she thrives in. Rather than compromise, she became more selective, focusing on projects where her process would be supported, not undermined. For audiences and critics alike, this recurring pattern raises questions. Why has such a consistently excellent performer been overlooked so many times by Hollywood's most high-profile award ceremony? The answer is likely a mix of timing, industry politics, and the nature of the roles she has chosen. Close has never shied away from playing difficult characters. Her performances are often restrained, emotionally complex, and grounded in realism. These are not the kinds of roles that always stand out in the often more showy landscape of awards season, where big transformations and dramatic flair can sometimes overshadow quiet nuance. One possible reason for this pattern is that Close's style of acting doesn't demand attention, it earns it gradually. Her characters don't rely on spectacle or theatricality. Instead, they develop over time, inviting the viewer to observe and reflect. This approach, while respected, doesn't always register as award-worthy in an environment that often rewards visibility, transformation, or overt emotional displays. While other actors might undergo dramatic physical changes or adopt extreme accents for a role, Close focuses on internal transformation. Her characters feel lived in, their emotions subtle but deeply rooted. Her performance in The Wife is a clear example of this. Released in 2017, the film follows the story of Joan Castleman, a woman who has spent decades supporting her husband's literary career, only to face a moral reckoning when he is awarded the Nobel Prize for work that she secretly wrote. The role required immense control, as Joan is a character who suppresses her emotions for most of the film until they erupt in key moments of release. Close's performance was widely praised for its quiet intensity and for the way she communicated so much with so little. She received an Oscar nomination, and many believe she would finally win. But on the night, the award went to Olivia Colman for The Favourite. It was a surprise to many, and it reignited conversations about what kinds of performances are valued in awards culture. This wasn't the only time a Close performance felt like a missed opportunity for recognition. Her earlier roles in Dangerous Liaisons, Albert Nobbs, and Fatal Attraction all earned her nominations, and each demonstrated a different facet of her range. Yet each time, the award went to someone else. Over time, this pattern began to take on symbolic weight. Those came to represent a certain kind of artist, serious, prepared, deeply skilled, who remained on the margins of popular recognition despite wide respect from her peers. Close herself has addressed this subject with a combination of humor and perspective. In interviews, she's admitted that not winning has been disappointing at times, especially when the work felt deeply personal or challenging. But she's also been clear that awards, while meaningful, are not the reason she acts. Her focus has always been on the craft, on telling stories that matter, and on portraying people as honestly as possible. That commitment hasn't changed, based on external validation. What's more interesting than the awards themselves is how Close's choices reflect her values as an artist. She has consistently chosen roles that defy easy categorization. Her characters often live in emotional grey areas. They're neither saints nor villains. Instead, they're defined by contradictions, secrets, and internal conflict. Close doesn't chase roles that are designed to win trophies. She chooses stories that challenge her and characters who feel real, even when they are difficult or uncomfortable to watch. This approach also means she has sometimes passed on more commercial opportunities that might have raised her profile or increased her chances at mainstream success. While she has worked in a variety of genres, including big-budget films and television, she's always returned to stories that prioritize character over plot. For example, her work in Albert Nobbs, where she played a woman living as a man in 19th century Ireland, was a deeply personal project. Close not only starred in the film but also helped produce and co-write it. The role was physically and emotionally demanding, and once again it earned her an Oscar nomination. But the film received mixed reviews overall, and her performance was arguably overlooked in the broader awards conversation. Beyond individual roles, there's also the broader question of how Hollywood defines greatness. Over the years, the industry has often favored performances that are bold and outwardly transformative. Performances where the actor disappears into the role in a way that is easy to measure. Glenn Close, by contrast, offers a kind of transformation that's less visible, but no less profound. She becomes her characters through stillness, through micro-expressions, and through an understanding of emotional undercurrents. It's the kind of acting that doesn't demand attention, but instead draws the audience in gradually. This difference in approach also speaks to how gender expectations play into recognition. Close has often played women who are powerful but not necessarily likable by traditional standards. Her characters are rarely defined by romance or softness. Instead, they're driven by ambition, pain, survival, and a complex sense of identity. These roles are often harder to celebrate within an industry that still occasionally favors more traditional portrayals of femininity. Close's refusal to soften her characters, or herself, has likely contributed to her being seen as a serious actor, but perhaps not always a star in the conventional sense. Despite this, she has become a role model for many younger performers. Her commitment to the craft, her refusal to conform to industry trends, and her ability to reinvent herself with each role have inspired a new generation of actors who see in her a different model of success. She doesn't rely on fame or controversy to stay relevant. Instead, she relies on the work, on the strength of her performances and the integrity of her choices. Her public image reflects this. Glenn Close is not someone who chases celebrity. She doesn't dominate tabloids or rely on viral moments to gain attention. When she appears in interviews or at events, she speaks thoughtfully, often turning the conversation back to the importance of storytelling and character. Her groundedness is part of what makes her respected in the industry, even if it doesn't always lead to widespread recognition outside it. The disconnect between her talent and her awards track record has led many critics to argue that Close represents something bigger than individual success. She represents a different kind of career, one built on consistency, intention, and long-term impact, rather than short-term rewards. She's often called the greatest living actor never to win an Oscar, but that phrase can sometimes overshadow what she has accomplished. The absence of a statue doesn't diminish the body of work she has built or the influence she's had on the art of acting itself. One of the more interesting dynamics in Close's career has been how she interacts with younger generations of actors and with the evolving norms around fame and performance. While she has never positioned herself as a critic of change, there is a noticeable distinction between the environments she tends to thrive in and those dominated by faster-paced, more publicity-driven filmmaking. For someone who values rehearsal, character study, and a deep dive into emotional truth, working on a set where speed is prioritized over substance can present real challenges. This divide becomes more apparent in projects that pair Close with younger actors whose training and philosophy differ from her own. While she remains gracious and professional, there is sometimes a sense that she is working from a different foundation. One rooted in theatre and classical acting techniques, where precision is earned through repetition and where emotion is developed, not just displayed. By contrast, many contemporary actors are trained to rely on instinct, presence, and charisma, often shaped as much by screen exposure as by formal education. These differences are not necessarily a source of conflict, but they do underscore a kind of cultural shift in acting. Glenn Close represents a school of thought where the work speaks for itself, where an actor's job is to disappear into the role and serve the story. Fame, in her view, is a byproduct of good work, not the goal. In an age of social media and curated personal brands, that perspective can seem out of sync, yet it is also what has protected the integrity of her career. When asked about the state of modern Hollywood, Close has expressed cautious optimism. She recognizes that the industry is expanding in ways that allow more voices to be heard, particularly through streaming platforms and international co-productions. At the same time, she is aware of the pressures younger actors face to remain visible, marketable, and constantly engaged with the public. Close herself has avoided social media for most of her career, preferring privacy and control over exposure. This stance, though increasingly rare, is part of her larger approach to acting as a form of service rather than self-promotion. Her collaborations with other veteran actors, particularly those who share her values, have often yielded the most creatively satisfying experiences. When she works with people who respect the process, who come prepared and share a mutual trust, Close shines. But even in situations where the collaboration is less ideal, she maintains professionalism. She doesn't engage in on-set drama or post-production blame. If a partnership doesn't work, she simply doesn't repeat it. The distinction becomes even clearer when we look at how Close has responded to trends around celebrity culture. For years, Hollywood has blurred the lines between actor and personality. Increasingly, performers are expected to be entertainers off-screen as well, active on social media, outspoken on politics, and constantly promoting their work. Close has selectively engaged with some of these expectations, but never fully embraced them. Her appearances at awards shows, interviews, and festivals are measured, often grounded in advocacy or craft rather than promotion. She avoids gossip, rarely comments on other actors, and prefers to talk about the roles themselves rather than her public image. One area where Close has been vocal, however, is around mental health. Drawing on her personal experiences and family history, she co-founded Bring Change to Mind, a non-profit dedicated to ending the stigma around mental illness. This advocacy work has added another dimension to her career, showing that she's not only committed to exploring human complexity on screen, but also to addressing it in real life. Her organization partners with schools and communities to educate people about mental health, and Close herself often speaks publicly about the need for greater understanding and compassion. This commitment to emotional honesty is not just part of her off-screen work. It's central to how she approaches characters. In roles like the one she played in Hillbilly Elegy, Close dove into emotionally uncomfortable territory, portraying a character with a rough exterior and a turbulent inner life. While the film received mixed reviews, Close's performance was once again singled out for its depth and attention to detail. Her ability to bring dignity and complexity to a character who might have otherwise been reduced to stereotype speaks to her belief in the value of nuance. Another example is her portrayal of Albert Nobbs, a woman who lives as a man in 19th century Ireland in order to survive economically. The role was not only physically and emotionally demanding, it also challenged audiences to consider identity and survival in new ways. Close spent years trying to bring the story to screen, and the resulting film was as much a testament to her perseverance as it was to her talent. For Close, the project was about giving voice to someone overlooked by history, someone whose story might otherwise remain untold. These roles reflect her broader commitment to portraying the human condition in all its forms. She is drawn to characters who are outliers, people who don't fit easily into categories or expectations. And rather than smooth over their rough edges, Close leans into them. She allows discomfort, ambiguity, and contradiction to remain present. This refusal to oversimplify may explain why some of her characters are hard to forget, even if they're not always easy to love. It also explains her selectivity. Close has turned down roles that she felt didn't honor the complexity of women's experiences. She has spoken about the lack of substantial roles for older women and the tendency in Hollywood to write characters that are either saints or caricatures. By choosing roles that resist these cliches, she has helped expand the possibilities for what women can be on screen. Flawed, powerful, insecure, intelligent, angry, or all of these at once. As Glenn Close moves through the later chapters of her career, she seems more focused than ever on legacy. But it's not a legacy built on awards or box office numbers. It's one built on consistency, honesty, and the belief that acting is an ongoing exploration of what it means to be human. She has mentored younger actors, participated in industry discussions on ethics and representation, and continued to advocate for the value of preparation and respect for the craft. Her legacy also lies in the influence she's had on how serious acting is perceived. While some actors build their careers around reinvention, Close has built hers around refinement. She has never tried to become someone else in order to stay relevant. Instead, she has deepened her understanding of the craft, always returning to the fundamentals: know your character, respect the story, and never take the audience for granted. In the years to come, it's likely that Glenn Close will be remembered not only for the roles she played, but for how she played them. Carefully, respectfully, and with a commitment that never wavered. She has navigated changes in the industry with quiet strength, refusing to compromise her values even when the culture shifted around her. That may not always make headlines, but it leaves a lasting impact. What stands out most about Glenn Close is that she has never treated acting as a path to fame. For her, it has always been a discipline, a way to understand people, and a way to tell the truth. And in a world where image often overshadows substance, that dedication feels increasingly rare and increasingly valuable.